Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Really glad we have so many to joining us today. We have people still coming into the room, so we'll start in about a minute. But really good to have you all here. We're going to kind of build on some of those things we talked about in last week's session on overview of student growth measures. Now we're going to get into the realm of choosing student growth measures, which ones may be a good fit for our system. And so today we're going to explore the pre-test, post-test student growth measure. This webinar is being recorded and can be accessed in share file. Deborah from my team will be dropping the link to today's resources. If you would like to follow along as we progress through the presentation, please use the Q&A feature to ask questions. We will try our best to answer them throughout the presentation. And I do want to note we have some great news because we have a district panel at the end of this presentation where you will be able to ask those questions. Our agenda today is going to kind of break down like this. For the first few minutes, we will do our welcome, agenda, and objectives. Then we'll spend some time learning some general information and options available to measure growth using pre-test and post-test for TIA. Next, we will spend some time dissecting TIA requirements for valid and reliable assessment. Once we have a high-level understanding of the process, we will get into the types of assessments that can be utilized, followed by a district panel where districts who have already gone through the process will share what they learned with prospective districts. We'll then wrap up this presentation and cover some district support, review what we've learned, and complete a survey. The objectives of this presentation are districts will be able to understand the characteristics and requirements of the pre-test post-test as a student growth measure. We will talk about what that looks like. We also want to understand key elements of quality district created assessments and quality third-party created assessments. Both third-party and district created assessments have their pros and cons, which we will analyze and discuss. And lastly, we will consider which pre-test post-test might be the best fit for which teaching assignments, what they may look like in your local context, and some next steps to consider. Right now, most of us are in the system development phase, and so we are planning on applying later this school year. And in April, applications will be due. And so what we're doing, most of us, at least in this session, we're doing that system development and we're engaging our stakeholders and we're developing and designing the different aspects of our system to ready ourselves for system application in April of 2026. Once we have a system application in place, we enter our data capture year and we collect all of that data. The following year, that data is then submitted for validation to TEA. And we do have some districts who are joining us today that may be in that system application phase or data capture year, or they may have even submitted data. So just we're really happy to have all of y'all here, and we're gonna provide some useful information, really kind of no matter where you are in your system development timeline. Now that we've looked at some of the objectives and our intro, let's go ahead and get into our TIA requirements for valid and reliable assessments. We do have some requirements in place. And we talked a little bit about those requirements last week at the intro to student growth measure session. When we're talking about our requirements, we are really looking that student growth is measured at the individual student level and can be linked to the applicable teacher. We're also looking that its content and standards align. The district application will have to show evidence of validity, reliability, development, administration, and scoring. When we are talking about this in context of the TIA application. Really, all of this is based off of our TIA application scoring rubric, and I will just pull it over here briefly. It is linked at the bottom of this page and will be updated later. And so these are going to be your requirements for really each component of your TIA system. And if we scroll down to pre-test, post-test, what we'll notice is that there are certain requirements that we have to meet on that application. what those are, it's going to be the validity of content. The district will have to make a local decision of what is considered valid. What's valid for that assessment, and the district will come to a conclusion on that. That's not something we tell the districts necessarily they need to use. We are also looking for valid and reliable administration protocols. That includes training. We're looking for valid and reliable scoring, security protocols in place, and then ultimately, can we use this to set growth targets to measure that student growth and then tie that back to the teacher's effectiveness? Again, the application scoring rubric is going to be a very important instrument for you as you are building out your system. The student growth requirements for pre-test and post-test. As I said earlier, go back to that rubric if you have any questions. But I want to note this is kind of what they're looking at or what we're looking at when you submit that applications. And so for validity of content, that would mean does it follow those state and district guidelines? Is there rigor and stretch? Is it aligned with the content standards? And so with validity and reliable administration protocols, what we're looking for is that testing window. And so for that testing window, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's the first 9 weeks you need to administer that pre-test, first 6 weeks for your semester long courses. We're also looking for test administration. Are you following your district guidelines? Does the district created its own guidelines? Is it aligning their guidelines to STAR? So we want to make sure there are some administration protocols and training protocols for your teachers and proctors in place. We're looking for that assessment to be vetted for reliability as well. For your scoring protocols, what we are searching for is the test is scored. You need to tell us how that test is scored. Is it going to be scored by a third party? Is it going to be scored by the person at the district are they going to score all of them? Is it going to be the teacher who's scoring it? So you need to have some kind of protocols in place to ensure that your security measures are up to date. We're also looking for that training, making sure that training is available or required for the teachers administering these exams to make sure they are administered reliably to students. During the course of this presentation, much of the discussion is centered on validity and reliability. Validity is the extent to which something measures what it claims to measure, and reliability means the consistency of the results. Let's take a closer look at these terms and how they relate to the creation of the pre-test and post-test. And so to illustrate this point, we have these targets, these dartboards here, and you can kind of see it illustrated. Something can be reliable but not valid. And so what that really means is you're testing the thing that's probably shouldn't be tested, and it's not really measuring what you want to measure. And so we could consider maybe giving a reading test, like a 12th grade reading test to a 12th grade English 4 class. That's not a great test. It's not really it's not really a valid test for those students to take because they are doing actually composition and rhetoric in English 4. They're not doing a lot of reading. And so, are they doing a lot of reading, but we're not measuring growth for reading, I should say. We can also have a test that's valid but not reliable. And what that means is the test assesses what we want to cover, but the scores are inconsistent. And a lot of the times that has to do with like how the test is put together, the stretch of the test, how things are phrased and worded. There's a lot of reasons why a test could be valid but not a reliable measure. And so the district would need to go and investigate if they notice that their scores are maybe not in line with what they thought that they should be based on historical context. What we're really looking for is that the system that the district develops would reliably and validly test all students. And so building a system to do this is kind of what you will show us in your TIA application. How are we going to reliably and validly measure an assessment measure student growth using these assessments? For the weighting tab of the TIA application, districts will answer the questions: who creates the pretest and post-test, and who sets expected growth. For the pretest post-test tab, districts will answer questions around the validity of content and administration and training protocols, security protocols, and scoring protocols. Note, this is just one example from an option one. We'll talk about what option one means a little bit more. in a bit, but this is just one example of what it could look like. And there could be different questions based on which pre-test, post-test option that the district uses. So this is a preview of what's to come. We do have our application launch webinars. Those are going to be on December 3rd for our renewal districts and December 10th for applying districts. For any new districts that want to gain access to the portal, you will need to submit your LOI or letter of intent to TIA so we can open up access for you and you can start playing around and building your system. Want to note here when we're looking at that pre-test, post-test tab, you can see how our requirements from this slide are kind of they're matching up to what our requirements are and what you'll need to explain on that pre-test, post-test tab for your system. In this section, we will discuss the objective. Districts will be able to understand the characteristics of pre-test, post-test as a student growth measure. Before diving into the requirements and other considerations, let's take a look at pre-test, post-test system with a bird's eye view to understand their fundamental application for TIA. Here's a basic timeline for pre-test, post-test implementation. It starts with the pretest during the first 9 weeks of the year. It can be an end of the year assessment from the previous year. Perhaps you would use STAR test as a great example of this. Districts may want to use STAR progress measure, and they would measure growth from the end of fourth grade math, end of year fourth grade math to end of year fifth grade math. So that is an option, and all districts do have that type of data available. Once the pre-test has been administered, it would need to be administered, as I said, within the first 9 weeks. If it is a semester-long course, it does need to be within the first 6 weeks of that course. In the first 9 weeks, the district needs to come up with a plan on how they're setting these growth targets for students. We do understand that maybe not all methods of setting expected growth, you're going to do this in the first 9 weeks, but generally you want to have your growth targets set for your students in the first 9 weeks. So teachers can use those as the inspiration to get students to meet their goal. With our pre-test, post-test in the last 12 weeks of the school year, so of course we've been doing our RTI, we've been working with students since the beginning of the year to get them to this point. The last 12 weeks of the school year, we would administer that post-test. If it is a semester-long course, you want to administer that within the last 9 weeks of the course. So we would want to administer that post-test, and then there would be a determination at the very end of the cycle of did the students meet their expected growth targets. It's a very general map of kind of what it would be or progression of what it would be. But there's lots of steps that would happen along the way, but that is definitely a bird's eye view. There's really those 4 steps, and districts would need to kind of plan to do all of those 4 steps to implement pre-test, post-test correctly for their system. Now, we do have some questions that we get a lot, like how are we going to set expected growth targets for our students? And so just want to say there are third-party tests that do have growth targets, and I'm thinking of NWEA MAP, I'm thinking of STAR, these assessments that are highly leveraged across the states. Districts are using them already. They're gathering data from them, and they do provide third-party growth targets for students. But that's not going to be a fit for every single assessment out there. And so some assessments you are going to need to set that growth at the local level. The district will make a determination and they can gather data. To assist districts with this, we have gathered our sample models of how districts do set expected growth. And so this is done with a study that we went and did around the state of Texas to understand what does that look like when we're setting growth at the local level. We're not relying on vendors. And so would encourage you to go to that Setting Expected Growth Targets webinar for more information led by yours truly. But there are ways for you to do that out there. And a lot of them are very tried and true, and many districts are using them, and their teachers are being designated with these local growth targets. All right. Want to give a scenario, and this is just a little bit of the reason we're going to do this is because the answer to these questions on our weighting tab is going to determine how we fill out our pre-test, post-test tab. And so we're going to go ahead and launch a poll here. And I want you to read the scenario. I'll leave it open for a minute. I want you to read the scenario and determine who creates that pretest post-test, who sets the growth target, and who creates the post-test. About 30 seconds remaining. We're at 34% participation. All right, we got about 8 seconds left. Go ahead and wrap it up. Enter your poll choice, and we will share those results. All right. Can y'all see the results? Give me a thumbs up on there if y'all can see it. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So when we're looking at this scenario, we have Pecan ISD. They are wanting to assess their eighth grade science students using select questions from a release star test at the beginning of the year. So when we're talking about TIA, who creates this test? Well, it looks like STAR created, or the state maybe created this, but actually, this would not be a third party test because we are adjusting this test. We are changing it in some manner. We're using select items or select questions from the STAR. And so whenever that happens, it becomes a district created pretest. This is a district created pretest because if they would have just given a released STAR, that would have been considered a third party exam. They hadn't, as long as they didn't make changes to it. With this, it would be a district created pretest. And who sets the growth targets? Well, whenever we have a district created pretest, it's automatically going to default us to the district setting the growth locally for those courses. And so that's what's happening. They use the results from the test and other evidence to set expected growth targets for students. Now that's that. So the district is doing that. And then who creates the post test? At the end of the year, the students are taking the star and they're using that to determine if the students met growth. And so with the star, that is a full administration of that star. That would be considered a third party post test. In this eighth grade science course, that would, based off of their selections here, it's going to tell them in the portal which tabs they would need to fill out on their TIA application. For our pretest post-test considerations, I would want to note that giving the release star test or using the previous year's EOY star as a pretest counts as a third party test. So as long as it is the full release test, or you want to use your star progress measure or something like that to measure growth from fourth to fifth grade math, that is a possibility. You can do that. That counts as the pretest. Also want to note that when you are going into doing your market research and figuring out which assessments are going to work for your system, most of those assessments are not going to come with third party growth targets. And so districts who want to have a comprehensive system that includes many of their teachers are going to have to come up with ways to locally develop these growth targets. And then who creates the pretest and who creates the post-test may differ for different teaching assignments, content, and grades. One of our frequently asked questions is how are districts currently using pre-tests and post-tests? And so what we will say is most are using the nationally normed criterion reference tests and some commonly used state approved nationally normed or criterion reference tests that I would consider that are like very that are used highly are going to be STAR and NWEA MAP. Those are going to be our top two, and then you really see other vendors starting to step in as well. And so what I mean by that is we have lots of vendors like Circle, who does the pre-K test. We have our vendors that work with our CTE department on our industry-based certification assessments as well. And so we do see districts picking up tests and devising ways to measure student growth in those courses. So do want to note most are using for their core teachers or their STAR tested teachers, they are using STAR. And then there are a lot of other options out there as well for districts to use. Do want to know it's a local decision. You don't have to use STAR. You don't have to use any particular assessment as long as it meets the standard of the rubric. When you submit your TIA application, you will be able to use that assessment. But we know that there's a lot of questions out there about assessments, and to help districts with that, we have created a third-party assessment options list. It's linked here at the bottom of the page. I'll walk you through that in just a bit, but want y'all to really soak in the graph because this is how you fill out your weighting tab. It's going to determine which pre-test, post-test option you are using. With option one, we are looking at our third party pre and post test. So the third party is creating that assessment. The district is not doing that. And the third party is also setting those growth targets. And so this is likely a contracted service or you're using STAR, but you are getting all three of these done by the third party vendor. This is not being growth is not being set locally and the assessment is not being created locally. That's option one. When we talk about option two, and this is where the districts will have to start measuring that growth locally. That is our third party pre and post test. And what that means is the district will have to set those growth targets locally for those third party tests. They don't, for instance, the circle exam, which is administered to our pre kindergarten, that does not come with third party growth targets, but it is a commonly used assessment in the state of Texas. And so for the district to use that exam, they would have to set the growth locally. Whenever we see this scenario, that is an option two scenario where you are using an assessment that is third party created, but you're setting the growth target locally. With option three, that's our in-house option. The district is creating both the pre and post test. They are also setting that locally. You often see this used in courses that don't have an assessment or when I'm thinking of like courses like physics, not a lot of assessments out there for it. So districts will opt to create their own pre-test, post-test for a physics course. Seventh grade Texas history. That's another one that I see a lot of districts doing. Option three with the district created assessment. So those are some options. Option three is definitely an option for your district, but you do have to meet a certain standard on the rubric, which we will talk about in just a bit. And then we have option four. Option four, that's what like our scenario with Pecan ISD earlier. They were giving that district created pretest with the select items from the STAR. They were setting growth locally and then using that end of year STAR as the post test. And we often see this in courses that like eighth grade science or 11th grade like US history course where there is a STAR test, but there is not a progress measure from the previous year or a third party growth measure from the previous year. With our third party assessment options list, what we aim to do, I would highly encourage everyone to bookmark this site. We go through, we do a lot of market research on what is available. I want everyone to note that TIA is a local designation system. So you are creating your local system. This list is not an approved list. This is just it's like a survey really of what is available out there. But it does have some great things in here. What we can do is we can go and click on different vendors. We can pull up the FAQs or the frequently asked questions and how they relate to TIA. And I would encourage you to look at this list to see if your courses match, if the courses that you're considering may have a match on this list. Here's some examples for option one. We often see MAP NWEA is setting those goals, and then they'll take that MAP test at the end of the year. Same thing with STAR. If we look at this last one, our sixth grade ELR teachers, they're taking the fifth grade end of year STAR. They're going to use that as the pretest, the STAR progress measure from year to year to the end of year sixth grade STAR. These are would be considered option one or that third party option. For option two, what we see is with like if the district wants to use the circle exam, there are no there are no third party growth targets, so the district does have to set those locally. Same thing with the industry based certification. If the district wants their to measure growth in their welding three with one of the IBCs for welding, they can do that, but they would have to set that target locally as the district does not, or as the vendor does not provide that growth target. Now, for option three, we often see this, like I said, in those courses that don't have readily available assessments. And so you do see a lot of this with world language. I see a lot of CTE courses, especially those early, like those year one and two courses that don't have an IBC associated with them. A lot of times districts will create their own pretest and post-test, administer them in those courses to measure growth. Also, things like music, seventh grade Texas history, courses that don't have readily available assessments. If you are interested in building your own assessments, we do have a link at the bottom of this page on best practices for building local quality assessments. I do walk you through some best practices and things that you would need to consider to do that effectively. So would encourage you to view that if this is a strong option for your district. When we get into example four, we really see this with our star, those star courses, like I said, that have that end of year star, but then they don't have a star progress measure or a way to measure growth from year to year. And so districts will give a district created pretest. And then at the end of the year, go ahead and do that star. I also see it a lot in AP courses as well. So they are doing a district created AP exam. And then at the end of the year, doing those AP exams, those third party AP exams to measure growth. All right, let's go over some of our enabling conditions. We talked a little bit about this in the last presentation, and I said that there would be a further breakdown of what that could look like when we get to each student growth measure. So our enabling conditions are the factors that need to be in place for the effective and efficient implementation of student growth measures for TIA. With option one, funding is going to be the big barrier. So we do have some free options or low cost options, including STAR out there. So there are some options, but you're not going to be able to comprehensively um, cover all of your teachers with these option one tests. In reality, you're only going to be able to cover your core teachers, reading and math, particularly grades 4 through 10 mostly. There are some vendors out there that may provide more, but generally speaking, that's what you're going to see from these option ones. And so districts will need to consider option two if they want to start adding some of these other teachers. If they want to add their pre-K teachers, there's not a growth measure for TIA, or sorry, for pre-K. So we want to make sure that we come up with a way to devise the growth. And to do that, you do need some district capacity. Do you have somebody that is able to look at data? Are they able to calculate growth? Are they able to have conversations on level setting with teachers on where students should be at the beginning of the year? So there are a few enabling conditions that go with that. With our option three, there's a lot that goes with because the district really takes the onus on themselves to develop, administer, and then measure growth using these pre and post tests. And so capacity is the issue. Do you have the capacity to calculate the growth? Do you have the capacity to administer that assessment? And do you have the capacity to create these assessments as well? With our option four, funding is definitely still the concern as well. And in addition to everything that we talked about in option three, because with option four, you are using district created for that pretest. Okay, so we're gonna play like this is a waiting tab, and we'll walk through it, and just to show you how it would end up on your TIA application once you choose your selections on your waiting tab. So for the assessment used for pretest, we're using the previous year star and star transition tables with spring star. So which option would that be? That's going to be option one because the third party is doing everything. They are setting growth and they are creating that assessment. With our second option, it looks like we have a district created test with the district setting growth and using the industry-based certification exam. When we're looking at that, that's an option four. So the district is creating the pretest, but they are using that third-party post test to measure growth. With our next one, we have the district doing all of it. And when the district is creating both the pre and post test and setting those growth targets, that is going to be option three. And then when looking at this next one, we have Circle with Circle Pre-K, and the district is setting those growth targets, and then they're going to use the spring administration of Circle Pre-K to measure growth. When we see that third-party assessment with the district created growth targets, that would be an option two. And that based off of how you fill these in, you'll need, like, for example, if this was your waiting tab, you would then unlock all four of these options and have to fill in your system requirements for each of these options on your TIA application. In this section, we will cover the objective. Districts will be able to understand key elements of quality district created assessments and quality third party created assessments. Let's get into some of the different assessment types, district created and third party. Each has its pros and cons. Let's examine how they can be used for TIA and some considerations that districts need to go through before implementing them as a part of their local designation system. In addition to the requirements we discussed earlier, district created assessments also require strong content expertise to design the assessment and multiple levels of review to ensure that the assessment is valid and reliable. Let's examine each of these factors in detail. Choosing the right personnel to create the assessment is likely the most important factor in implementing the district created pre-post test model. While districts do have a choice to use a third-party pre-test, there are many instances where that's not feasible. It's important that the test creator understands the core standards and the basics of item development as well as item vetting. Teachers, instructional coaches, district content coordinators can all be wonderful writers to be utilized by the districts. For smaller districts without a content coordinator or instructional coach, teachers can be utilized to create and vet the assessments. Would remind districts that you are able to hold back about 10% of your TIA funds. And so one thing that we have seen districts do is compensate their teachers over the summer months, holding back some of that 10%, compensating those teachers to write the assessments, get those assessments vetted and piloted. So there are options out there for districts to do this. And a lot of you are already doing it and doing it well. And it's kind of just putting it on paper now and being able to use it to measure growth. Now, when we're talking about rigor, we do want to have some best practices with levels of rigor. So, wanted to call this slide out right here. We would definitely recommend you use a taxonomy to evaluate your questions when you're developing them. Bloom's taxonomy is very well known. There's also Webb's depths of knowledge. When creating an assessment, one should aim to have a mix of both higher and lower level difficulty questions. According to researchers, SAT reserves around 10% of the questions as to utilize higher order thinking skills such as analyze, evaluate, and create. Another best practice is to have a mix of both higher and lower level questions to gauge student mastery across the achievement spectrum. And so what we mean by that is the stretch of the test. Are you assessing both your highest and lowest achieving learners? Are you getting reliable data back from assessing both your highest and lowest achieving students? And so would encourage districts as they are developing their own pre-test use the link on the bottom to go into this in a little bit more depth, but make sure that we have enough stretch to the test. This is something that the district will need to evaluate as a part of their review process. Speaking of review process, we do have multiple levels of review. And in this graphic, we see an example of multiple levels of review that districts could utilize in implementing their district-created pre-tests and post-tests. At the bottom, we see that test writer, and who is the first level of review. This test writer takes the assessment to the committee who will approve it. This committee could consist of teachers. Now, once the assessment passes through the committee, it will be approved by the appraiser. And lastly, by the time it comes to pilot the assessment, they will then gather that data and then make changes before issuing the exam. I do want to note this is an ideal system. This is not something that maybe not everyone can do, and that's understandable. And so for our small districts out there that may not have the personnel for all these levels of review, small districts could consider working with nearby districts or ESCs to broaden their levels of review and increase the validity and reliability of their created assessments. In some cases, it may be the same person doing multiple reviews. This is acceptable if the process consists of review followed by feedback, edits, and then another level of review. Um, all right. Do you want to just state that this is definitely a best practice when we are doing this? It's not, you don't need these four levels of review. Just want to call it, this is a best practice, because if we do get that question, do we have to have all of these levels? No, but there should be multiple levels of review, and it is up to the district to kind of decide what that model would look like. All right. So when we talk about our considerations for our district graded tests, it really boils down to a few things. We're talking about local autonomy. The districts have complete local autonomy in what they want to put in those tests, who they want to write the tests, when they want to administer the tests, the design of the test. And so, like, that is definitely a benefit. When we're talking about another one, it's really useful for our non-core content areas. Sixth grade Spanish course may not be getting assessed, or that, but we can actually recognize those teachers with a district created test. They're also tailored to the specific course standards. Teachers are able to vet test items. They're easily adjusted. There's opportunities for collaboration and feedback. And then once that is happening, there you see buy-in on campuses and people wanting to to add to this mission of creating these pre-tests and post-tests. They feel confident in that system. Now, with our potential challenges, it is going to be the creation time. Time is going to be a challenge, and with that, there could be concerns with validity, reliability. Hopefully, those are sorted out through the multiple levels of review. There always is going to be concerns of bias whenever we're creating something locally, and so, like as I said a second ago, with the multiple levels of review, hopefully bias is removed from that equation when we are creating the assessment. Also, consistency of rigor. Maybe there's not enough stretch. Maybe it's too hard. Maybe it's too easy. And so that could be an issue as well. There's sometimes lack of time to vet these items, or there could be a lack of content expertise at the district. But I do want to note that the big idea is district created tests can work well for districts if they can ensure they are designed by content experts and have multiple levels of review. When we are talking about our third-party assessments, uh, there are some benefits and potential challenges we need to look at as well. And so I would say the availability of resources is a benefit. There are plenty of resources out there. At most core courses are going to be covered, and we are seeing growing expansion to some of these non-core courses as well. So there's quite an availability of resources in the market. The other benefit's they have a record of validity and reliability for the most part, especially with some like STAR and some of these tests that we've been taking for a while. And then the last benefit's they're gonna be familiar with stakeholders. Almost everyone's familiar with with third-party standardized tests. So that is going to be a great benefit of it as well. There's not a big learning curve for that. Now, with our potential challenges, you may not be able to find an assessment that matches your particular grade and subject. And so that could be a concern. And we see this quite often where maybe a district wants to use a test, and they say they want to use it for their um, pre-cal course, and they want to use, say, NWEA map. Well, NWEA map actually doesn't test up to pre-calculus, so they wouldn't be able to use that. They'd have to kind of figure out what they want to do to measure growth in that pre-cal course. That would be a challenge. Potential cost is always going to be a challenge. Some assessments are going to cost more than others, but another one is going to be our gathering stakeholder feedback. And so getting our stakeholders to agree on which of these assessments we should use, which ones measure growth effectively, coming to consensus, maybe viewing the materials from the vendors. It can be a process when you are considering your third-party test. And to help districts with that, we do have a checklist for you. With an abundance of third-party tests on the market, it is important that districts vet the assessments before purchasing them. A best practice is to define the teacher categories and then explore possible assessments. Once a list of possible assessments has been created, it is a best practice to reach out to the vendor and verify if the assessment system will work. I want you to see our third-party assessment options. at the bottom of this list again, because it may make just a little bit more sense after we walk through that. Would encourage everyone to after we walk through that last session. I think in this, I'm thinking this chart will make a little more sense now. So we're breaking it down by what the contents and courses covered are. We're also providing a vendor FAQ. So what are the highlights that our district would need to know about this product if we wanted to consider it for our local designation system? Again, wonderful resource, and we update that twice a year. So I would encourage you to bookmark that and use that as you start to gather your stakeholder feedback. Oops. All right. So we're going to start inviting our panelists up now. And while we do that, we're going to go over some next steps. So would encourage everyone to review your district's assessment systems. What assessments are you currently using? And what I mean by that, we know we're using lots of assessments already. We're likely measuring growth for our students, for our core teachers already with STAR. And so that's something that we can all just check on the list. We're already using STAR. We have something that we can cover those teachers with. What are we using outside of STAR to measure growth? Do we have a big CTE program? Are we using IBCs as a part of our system? Are we using MAP? Are we using M-Class to measure as a dyslexia screener at the beginning of the year to measure dyslexia, to measure reading comprehension? So there's lots of options that districts are doing. There's lots of required options like that districts are administering as well. And so it's kind of just what we would advise is to go and just build a list. What are we currently using out there? What grades and content and courses does that assessment cover? I'd also go and look at your district's testing calendar. How are we using assessment currently? Is that something? How are we prioritizing time to assess at beginning of year and end of the year? The other thing I would say is review uh, your district scoring and administration protocols for assessments to make sure those are in line with TIA standards. Next, once you've kind of done that, you've done your little landscape analysis, you understand what is in place already in your district, we would say go and check out the third-party assessment options list to consider what may better align with what you have, or may offer additional support or open up new avenues to assess different courses and different teachers in your system. While you're doing that, conduct stakeholder feedback. Talk to your teachers, talk to your department heads, talk to your content coordinators at the district level along the way to figure out what's going to work for your system. Remember, when we have that stakeholder buy-in, they're going to implement it at a much higher rate. So would say that's going to be a very important next step for the district as well. And then when available, review the TIA application and scoring rubric to determine which requirements have been met and which requirements your district will need to work on for full readiness for the spring 2026 TIA application cycle. Okay, now let me change my view. Here we go. I see everyone now. Or I see all the panelists now. Perfect, perfect. All right. So really happy to have all of our panelists here today. We have some tried and true districts that have done some amazing things around the state. We have some smaller districts. We have some larger districts. We have some districts that are implementing multiple models for student growth measures. So we're going to pick their brain a little bit with this district panel. How it'll work, I'll go ahead and make introductions, and then after each district has some time to ask a question or to answer a question, we will then move on and open it up to any questions that the floor may have. So if you have a question for our panelists, please use that Q&A feature, and we will run it by them as time allows. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll present our first panelists. We have Wendy McMullen and Natasha Williams from Navarro ISD. They are from a rural cohort district. So this is a rural district, and they're going to share their experience with us. Wendy serves as the Chief Academic Officer for Navarro ISD, where she leads district-wide efforts to strengthen instructional practices and improve student outcomes. She's deeply committed to the implementation of TIA, which allows the district to further recognize and reward excellence in teaching to support educators' growth and student success. We also have Natasha, and she's an instructional program and coordinator from Navarro ISD. Her deep and varied experience, which includes serving as campus principal and district administrator, has equipped her with a comprehensive understanding of district-wide initiatives like TIA. All right. We also have today with us Alicia Sewell from Aldine ISD. She's a project analyst for the Teacher Incentive Allotment. Alicia Sewell supports Aldine ISD's commitment to rewarding excellence in the classroom. Through this program, the district has distributed over $16.5 million to approximately 750 designated teachers and provides an opportunity for nearly 98% of its educators to earn a designation. We also have with us Anne Marie from Burleson ISD. And over the past two decades, her professional journey has been deeply rooted in education with the focus on human resources and finance. Since 2021, she has led the TIA for Burleson ISD. All right. So we'll just I want to open it up with Navarro ISD first. Sorry, let me get back to the right slide with Navarro ISD. And so one of the questions we always kind of receive from smaller districts is what challenges did you face in implementing TIA and how were those challenges overcome?
So, Frank, I think good morning. Thank you for having us. I
Mhm.
really am humbled that you asked us. We've been deep in the weeds with all of our TIA stuff right now with our data validation, but I think you've hit on a couple of things through your presentation, and I will highlight some of those as I talk a little bit about the challenges at Navarro. But we are a small district, a rural district, and just finding teachers, of course, is a challenge. So, TIA was our motivation to get teachers to us because rural districts have the opportunity to get larger TIA payments for our teachers. So one of our initial challenges was which teachers were we going to be recognizing? I mean, we have over 300 staff members, and that's a lot of data to validate, and that's a lot of assessments to create because we have singletons, as I call them, teachers who only are the teacher of that content. And so that's one of our biggest challenges is who are we going to recognize? So our first application was our K through 12 content teachers, classroom teachers. And then we did an expansion to our application after sitting down and looking at how the first application went that now includes our functional academic teachers, teachers in specialized instruction, CTE. So just identifying where you want to start. Any district has that challenge, and where will we go first? Some of our other things that were really difficult is the funding. Initially, TIA funding, that 10% that you mentioned, isn't given to you in the beginning, it's given to you at the end. So we had to use local dollars to identify, assessment products. I'm glad you walked them through district created and third-party vendors. There are a lot of things that are already created that are free, which was where we went first. We've been working with Region 15. They have been helping us get our feet on the ground with TIA. So rural districts have opportunities for grants for free product support and free I called it almost counseling, TIA counseling. They would sit with us and walk us through what we needed to do to be effective with our TI practices. But finding local money for assessment tools. We do use the MAP product for part of our assessment. So that's a big expense for us. And that's a regular expense. We use it for multiple things. So it was a natural thing to use. But we found a music first program that was very, very exciting for us that helped us with our fine arts individuals because their assessments are going to be more difficult to create, more difficult to find, and more specialized. ICEV was a vendor that we used for our CTE teachers. So all of those products cost, and that funding can be recovered depending on how many of our teachers meet the TIA, threshold and actually get the TIA funding. We are going to recover some of that, but also know that as a small district, you will have to set aside funding for that in the beginning in order to effectively have your pre and post assessment tools. And then our other big challenge was the staff buy-in. I think that, with T-tests as an instrument, we use T-tests as 40% of our TIA. Our staff members really wanted to make sure that the validity of their observations was there and that there was no preferential treatment this administrator likes this teacher better, so they got a better TIA score. So we really had to work with our administrators and do a lot of calibration. So we started a Tuesday admin PLC. And so every Tuesday we get together and we have three components of that. One of them is called a Tuesday tour, where we look at the progress of the school, and then the administrators and the district leadership team go out and tour the classrooms together. It's a little formatting to our teachers. We had to let them know that you're going to have 3 to 5 people in your classroom at a time. And it's for us to learn from your practice. It's not for us to go in there and say, we got you, you weren't teaching. No, it was more about us working to calibrate so that when we step outside, if one teacher is giving a teacher distinguished, or if one administrator is giving a teacher distinguished and another administrator is developing, then we had to make sure we were talking about those components and looking through the same lens so that our teachers did have fair and equitable evaluations. So those were some of our initial challenges. I could speak long term for other things. Natasha, who is my instructional programs coordinator, has been the voluntold person to do a lot of the data validation. So I think that's so important, is that you find a team. There are 4 of us in the district working to do this. Our HR director, Natasha, who's the instructional program coordinator, myself, who's the chief academic officer, and then our ELA instructional coach. We are the TIA team, and none of us had that duty assigned in our duties, but because we're a small district, we wear a lot of different hats. So I would say to all my small district partners out there, identify your worker bees, because this is a very challenging process of data validation and calibration and finding pre and post assessments. So those were some of our initial challenges, and I'll be happy to answer any questions in the end if you have any for a small district. But again, Frank, thank you for including us in this. We really are excited about the progress. We're looking at the number of teachers who will possibly be receiving a designation this year, and I think it really has impacted teaching and learning as we hoped, and it's also been a huge recruitment tool.
Yeah, I love that explanation. And it really is kind of like a comprehensive system. Like, to do TIA, you kind of go and look and you evaluate all the components of your system. How are we even like how are we spending our money? How are we spending our time? How are we evaluating our teachers? How are we assessing our students? And so it really makes you take a step back and like align your systems with best practices. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Wendy. Love to hear from small districts out there. Know you have some unique challenges that our larger districts don't. And so appreciate you being a part of this panel.
Thank you.
All right, we have our next question, and this is going to go to Alicia Sewell from Aldine ISD. And so Alicia's been doing this quite a while. She's actually been a panelist a couple of years ago too. They've built a very comprehensive system, as we said, with 98% of their teachers covered. And so what I want to know a little bit more about is what was Aldine's rationale for using district created pretest post-test for their non-core courses? And then what was the biggest challenge in developing those pretests and post-tests?
So I can say, Frank, very happy to see you again. I'm Alicia Sewell. I'm in Aldine ISD, and we are a part of the metropolitan Houston area. So we are a very large district. Some of the rationale that Aldine ISD used to create our own pre and post assessment for our non-core subjects is to include as many teachers as possible in our local designation system, such as art, music, most of our career and technology education courses. When standardized testing like STAR was not available, or third-party vendors were not available. When we started our system, there were not very many vendor-created assessments. They have come through fruition, so we are very thankful for that. But when we started back in cohort D, there were not very many. Some of the reasons we chose was to promote equity, to allow the dedicated and effective teachers in our non-core subjects to be recognized. We believe just as much as in our CTE teachers as we do for our teachers that teach English language arts. We want to be able to measure growth and have a clear metric for our student growth progress over the course of the year. And this aligns with TI's emphasis on student growth rather than just the proficiency. We also want to tailor our assessments to our specific curriculum within Aldine ISD. Our local created tests can be designed directly to reflect our district specific curriculum and instructional goals for each of our non-core subject areas, providing most accurate measures of what a student is expected to learn or be able to do by the end of the interval of instruction. Some of our biggest challenges and hurdles were creating local assessments, ensuring that they're valid and reliable. These critical requirements for our assessment and are ultimately going to need to be used within your validation. So we had to ensure our rigor and consistency, developing assessments that are appropriately rigorous for each subject area in each grade level is a complex task. The district must ensure that the tests are accurately measured for the intended knowledge and skills for that particular content area. One of the other challenges we had was resource allocation. Creating highly effective assessments with a wide variety of non-core subjects requires significant investment in time and expertise, including curriculum specialists, assessment writers, and professional development, not only for our district level experts, but also our teachers and how to administer those particular assessments. Buy-in and trust. Ultimately, teachers and administrators must have the confidence that the assessments are fair and accurately reflect student learning. This involves transparent development process, clear communication, ongoing collaboration with educators in each subject area. Without this trust, the system can lead to stress and feeling of inequity among teachers. And finally, the data and analysis and interpretation. Once the assessments are administered, the district must have a robust system in place to analyze that data and use it to make it a valid judgments on student growth for teacher effectiveness, and require the expertise in educational measurements within their statistical analysis. With that being said, within district created assessments, you must understand that you cannot keep the same district created assessment from year to year. You have to be able to go in, modify the questions, especially when the TEKS change. So just being there, knowing that we have 98% of our teachers, Frank, it's absolutely amazing. And you've been along with our journey as well. I'm open to answer any questions that anybody has about creating district created assessments, but it has been pivotal in our local designation system.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You said you were training your teachers on how to write assessment questions. Like, tell us about that, because when maybe your teachers aren't the ones that are writing them for the district assessment, but then just taking that skill, being able to apply that to the classroom as well. So, what does that look like? Just building out a system comprehensively around pre-test, post-test. What kind of practices did you have to put in place to kind of change the culture, especially in these courses that may not have been tested regularly before?
So a lot of our CTE tests that do not have a vendor created, so that don't have an IBC or are not the certifying courses, we want those teachers to still be eligible. So and our program directors and our curriculum directors are not experts in those fields. So my program director on my curriculum may be an expert in welding, but is not an expert in HVAC repair. Therefore, we have to rely on our expert, which is our teacher. What we typically do is we create a bank of questions. Therefore, the teacher will never know what questions we're specifically asking, but we have a rotating bank of which we have, and we pay them out of our 10% for curriculum writing during the summer in order to validate those. And then we also send those questions off and have our content level experts and our curriculum, our teaching and learning department vet those questions and make sure they're appropriate. But we absolutely have to have teacher buy-in, because if I had someone who is a JRTC instructor writing for HVAC, I would not have a reliable assessment. You're muted, Frank.
No, wonderful. I love hearing those kind of practices. Sorry. I thought I was, no, didn't know I was on mute. I love hearing those kind of practices. So we see like that 10% being utilized to actually build these assessments over the summer. Teachers are being used as test writers. They are getting vetted with multiple levels of review. And so love to see that approach happening. That is an option for districts. And so as Alicia said, there are going to be courses out there that may not have a test or it may not align with like how the teacher teaches the course in some cases. And so there's we would encourage you if this is something you would want to pursue to go and view those different resources out there on building quality assessments. It really does give you an outline of the steps that need to be in place for you to do this effectively. All right, let's go. I want to move to our next panelist. Thank you so much for sharing, Alicia. Um, we have Anne Marie from Burleson ISD. And Anne Marie, our question for you is, could you elaborate on your district's approach to establishing testing calendars, training educators, and administering assessments during the initial 9 weeks of the academic year?
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Frank, for including me in this today. So basically, we start with our testing calendar and we look at the STAR dates. So that's kind of where we set our baseline for our beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year assessments. Now, with pre and post test, we're only collecting data for beginning of year to end of year, but we do use the middle of year assessment just to see how things are going, to kind of get like a preview of what direction we're going in. And so from there, for our beginning of year, we followed the MAP guidance on administering the BOY testing. So that's kind of where we also get some dates for our calendar. And then we apply these days to our other assessments, which right now we use MAP and then we use Circle for our pre and post test. From there, our district testing calendar includes our director of assessment and accountability, our executive director of curriculum, and then our secondary and elementary chief of campuses. So it's kind of a team there where they kind of work together on establishing those dates. And then once it gets approved, we share it with our campus principals, and then we have it on our staff portal and on the TIA page, so that everybody's aware of when our start and end dates are for our beginning, middle, and end of year testing assessments. In regards to the training part, this is really a ongoing process that with TIA that you're going to want to consider and add into your planning piece for it, is that we have from beginning, middle, and then end of year testing. As a district, we always want to make sure that every teacher remains and is reminded of our testing practices, procedures, and our standards. So we have our testing protocols and procedures also on our staff portal for our teachers to review. But we also make sure that our administrators go over the process before beginning of year, before middle of year, and before end of year assessments testing as well. We never want to assume that our teachers or testing administrators are aware of the process. So we always just kind of go through that, knowing that it's just a reminder. If there's any questions, we can address them. But for us, it's all about consistency. We want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that we don't have any situations where a teacher's telling us, well, I didn't know, or where our testing protocols just, aren't aligned to the way they should be. And so from there, whenever we are doing tests during our 2-week period for beginning, middle, and end, we actually have district coordinators, we have directors, we have chiefs, as well as campus staff who are constantly walking the halls and monitoring during the testing period as well. So it's kind of an ongoing system. It's kind of like a mini STAR during those 3 testing periods. And for TIA purposes, I also provide a beginning of year and an end of year process for our campus administrators. And basically what this is to meet with their teachers and go over TIA information, our testing dates, testing protocols. Our teachers sign an acknowledgement form that they acknowledge that we're collecting TIA data for either MAP, Circle. This year we're doing SLOs, as well as an oath in regards to following testing protocols and the training that's required. So we do have those additional pieces that we've included with our TIA process for beginning and end of year testing. And then the acknowledgement is also more or less for transparency. So at the beginning of the year, that teacher is aware that we are collecting TIA data for them. So if they did leave middle of the year or they changed assignments, they're also aware within that letter of, what happens if that is the case. So if they change assignments or no longer a teacher, then their data is no longer collected. And so that is pretty much our process. I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have any in regarding to testing calendars or protocols that we have.
Yeah, just to kind of build on that, when you initially started doing this work, how did you go about choosing which assessments? And then I believe that you used an assessment and you were like, hey, I don't like this one as much, and so then you changed it the next year. And can you talk a little bit about that process that you went through to kind of find the right balance for your system?
Yes, absolutely. So the reason why we started with MAP and Circle here at BISD is because we had experience with those testing modules. And so whenever we started TIA in 2021, I was new to the district. And so I was learning a lot in regards to protocols and testing procedures and really just everything that we had in regards to capturing student growth. And so whenever I started in 2021, Burleson ISD had been using MAP for about 5 or 6 years before. And so that was kind of a given. It was one of the pieces of data that we could collect. Teachers were already aware of the process. We did have to do some fine tuning just to make sure that we closed any loose ends in regarding to our testing protocols. And then, of course, with Circle, it was kind of the same thing. So basically, what we did is we created or more or less expanded our testing protocols. We made sure that everything was aligned, and not to say that it wasn't aligned before, but we wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page and that everybody was being consistent with it. And then from there, in order to expand, we wanted to use another product, and we were accepted to approve it. So we used it last year for data collection, and then this year with reviewing the data and after all of our feedback from our teachers this past school year with that product, we found that it was not a valid and reliable testing model to use. With that test, I had several emails and phone calls from teachers and administrators that the third-party vendor end of year test, beginning of year test, had questions that didn't pertain to the subject, or that students really didn't understand the questions that were being asked. So there was not a lot of alignment in regards to the TEKS of the course. And then the second thing is that with the product that we were using, a lot of teachers really weren't able to see what was given. So with NWEA, teachers feel really confident with that because they're seeing data, they're able to see and kind of mark where students are. With this other product, it was all kind of more of an in-house thing where only our director of accountability and assessments was able to see that information. And so whenever we looked at all the data this summer, with all of the data, looking at the various growth models of figuring out as a district what growth we wanted to use, using 4 different models of growth, whether it be the quintile or district percentage growth. I mean, we use so many different ones. Nothing really supported the data that we got. And so we did ask TEA to let us not include that and to switch those teachers to SLOs, which is what we're going to work on collecting this year. So in conclusion, that was really a full-fledged of a district. I mean, all hands on deck. I mean, we talked to teachers, principals, administrators, directors. I mean, just all kinds of feedback to make that decision.
Wonderful. Real quick, Anne Marie, does this means now that 100% of your teachers like that are included in the system? Is that correct?
That is
Oh,
correct.
wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah. You were one of the rare districts where we're seeing that. Is your next step going to be enhanced TIA for
Um, we're
Burleson?
talk we're talking about it. Enhanced TIA is something that we'd like to go for in regards to keeping our campus administrators and giving them some additional income from the TIA side of the system. And so that's something that we've looked at. We haven't made a decision yet. We'll probably kind of wait to see what other districts are doing and what it looks like and kind of make decisions later on after we're 100% approved, of course.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
We do have one question here from the chat from Lou. He's wondering if you would Anne Marie could you share your sample acknowledgement form? So maybe you can get with Lou afterwards,
Sure.
and yeah. So maybe Lou, maybe send I don't know if y'all, I don't think y'all can send messages, so maybe we can get you in touch with Lou. I'll put that as a note to self.
Perfect. Yes, and he can find me on the Burleson ISD website under the Human Resources Department.
Great. All right. So another question: How are y'all measuring growth for your PE and or JROTC if that's available at your district? Whoever wants to take it can have it.
We use a district created pre and post assessment for our DoD teachers, only because there is not a normed assessment for JROTC that we've seen. For our PE teachers, we use our particular curriculum within the health component of it. And it's a district creation because we modify the assessment that our curriculum is. But there are people that do use that particular curriculum in and itself. So there are some. I've seen some people use FitGram for PE as well.
We're in the beginning stages. We're using SLOs for all of our CTE and fine arts and PE. So ours will be using, or our growth will be determined based on that rubric from the SLO model.
And ours is a district created assessment, and we look at the students' capacity for growth. What could they do at the beginning of the year based on the skills that they could do at the end of the year? So our coaches are consistently working on those skills and drills, and that's what ours is locally created, and that's what it measures.
Great. Thank y'all so much for answering that. Just to follow up on that, I do know some districts are like Alicia said, using the fitness gram. And so that would be kind of a local decision if you want to use that. It may be a good measure for some courses more than other courses. I do know that there is a health and anatomy component to many like middle school and high school PE courses, and that may not be the best assessment, but you can definitely use it. That's going to be a local decision. And I know there's going to be, I think there's some enhanced requirements. I need to actually dive into them. I think they brought the presidential fitness test back as well. So maybe we'll have some news on that for y'all at a later point. Let me see our next question. If fitness gram is used to measure growth, if so, how are you calculating growth? So generally what that you would set that growth locally, and how I've seen it done with districts is like there's like requirements. It's like students at this age and this weight would do like be able to do one chin up and like 12 push-ups or whatever. And so maybe that student can't do the 12 push-ups. They could do 3 push-ups at the beginning of the year, but at the end of the year they can do the 12. And so you'd set that growth target locally on what that should be. That's how you would use it, but we're not endorsing that because there may not be the best assessment for all aspects of your physical education program. It's really only testing fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that is exactly why we don't use the fitness gram in our district, and we created one that also has a health component to it.
All right. Want to talk a little bit. Well, if y'all have a question, first off, go ahead and put it in here, and we'll ask it to our panelists. But want to talk a little bit about engaging stakeholders at the beginning of this process when you're going to add a new teacher category. And I want to open it up to Anne Marie. We'll go to you first on this. I know you had to do a bunch of this, I think, over the spring and summer, like engaging those stakeholders to get them on board. It may not have been for pre-test, post-test, but can you walk us through that process? Because the process will be very similar no matter what student growth measure you choose.
Absolutely. So with TIA, it's an ongoing communication piece. I feel like I'm constantly talking TIA here at Burleson, as well as doing my other role. But with TIA communication, I almost feel like I don't communicate enough, even though I feel like I talk about it all the time. But with that, I, back in 2021 when we started this, we did send out surveys. I mean, I sent out surveys all the time, got feedback, and then over the years, the last few years, that communication has just continued. Surveys is one thing that I do often, as well as reach out. I take phone calls, I take emails, I do meetings with teachers, with administrators, with teacher groups, just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page with TIA. I will tell you that a majority of our teachers want TIA. I have a selected few that I get every year about I don't want to participate, or they'll tell me on their acknowledgement form, don't include me. And then it's always my same response of it's not an option. If we are an approved district for a category, we will collect your data. And basically, it's a courtesy to let you know of what we're collecting from you. But for the most part, when teachers do receive that stipend and that payout, they're excited, and it's a great feeling. This last year, we paid almost 1.9 million to designated teachers for our district, and just seeing the input and the impact that they have. And this year, I know I'm diverting from your question, Frank, but this year for our communication piece with TIA is that we actually gave a historical scorecard to our teachers because we've modified our compensation plan. And with that communication piece to let teachers know, it was really an eye opener for our administrators and our teachers to see their historical data of 3 years in a row. We've always given them scorecards, and so every year they've gotten one, but they've never seen it the way that we laid it out with their 22, 23, 23, 24, and then 24, 25 year data. So it's really eye-opening to see for district administrators and for teachers how their data is coming out. I've been getting calls probably for the last 2 months in regards to their data, because teachers are really eager about it now. And they kind of panic. They're like, well, I've had a rough year. It's okay. Everybody has a rough year, but we're just going to keep on going. But at the same time, I have teachers that see their data and then they call me and they're upset with themselves about it. I can't believe I let my students down. It's like, it's not that bad off. It's okay. You're doing great. You're still a exemplary teacher, even though, you're a master status. And so I think, overall, the communication piece has to continue. I mean, you have to make sure that your teachers are on board. And to be honest, not everybody's going to be on board. You're not going to make everyone happy. The hardest part, I guess, everybody has their bumps in the road, but they're also learning experiences. And that's what our last pre-test and post-test system was. It was an experience for us to say that, hey, we tried it. You guys wanted it. We tried it. We listened to what you said. You were right. We, are, following up, trying to make sure that we're not going to use this, that we are going to provide you guys with something that's better aligned for you. And most of them were extremely appreciative of it. So communication is a big piece.
Wendy, what does that look like at the rural level?
So we did beginning of the year training at each campus. We have the professional development days before the school year starts. And we, as the team of 4, went to the campuses, had a slideshow where we talked through the specifics, because the teachers really don't understand all the components and the details. And so they had lots of questions. And with the 4 of us there, we were able to address those questions in a general assembly. But also we had follow-up conversations independently with specific teachers, because they're really anxious about, what are you looking for? You're doing T-tests. What if I get this administrator that does my T-test, because this one does easier T-tests? So we really had to make sure that we were addressing all of their worries. And like I mentioned in the beginning, is creating that buy-in was probably one of our biggest focuses in the beginning, is making sure the teachers understood what it was. And of course, they see the slide of show me the money, and we show them the different designation levels and what that could mean for them. And that's when they get truly excited about it. But what if I'm not good enough to get one of those designations is, always a question that weighs on them. So really, they're looking very closely at their data now, and they have questions about the data. And so that's another thing that we have to be cognizant of is, you talked about teacher surveys in the beginning. When we were telling the teachers this was coming, we had crickets. They were all so busy with other things. No one was showing up for meetings or are coming. And once we got it lifted off the ground and implemented, all of a sudden the wheels are turning, and we're playing catch up with people that we were hoping to capture before we started. So now I think they're very engaged with the process, and just lots of opportunities for conversation. You mentioned communication. That's highly essential that you have those FAQs. So we created an FAQ page, frequently asked questions. So we're not always answering the same question over and over. That was helpful. And so we put that on a TIA website page. You mentioned, Anne-Marie, y'all have a TIA spot as well. And so we put all things TIA on our district website it's our intranet. It's for our staff members to see. And they're frequently asked questions, and we can refer them back to those documents. And we continually have, you shared a lot of resources, Frank, at the beginning of your meeting. We take a lot of the resources from the agency and put them on this page as well for teachers to review and get good information. There is a lot of information out there about TIA, and some of it's misinformation. So we want to make sure that our teachers are getting accurate details, and that they're able to feel supported through the process, and they're able to ask for questions. And one of the other things that comes up is when teachers change assignments, because I will tell you, we want to promote our teachers, but not a lot of them want to get into leadership when they see I'm not going to be eligible for TIA if I do this. In fact, I, as a chief academic officer, thinking I'm going to go back to the classroom. This is pretty exciting. But it's, that's another thing, is we have to be cognizant about the level of compensation, because we want to maintain teachers moving into leadership roles. But yes, the intent of TIA is also to keep those strong teachers in the classroom. So finding that balance with our teachers has been something we've been working with too, as far as communicating TIA and the value of TIA and the sustainability of it in our district.
I love it. Love hearing these stories from the field. We've heard stories where like these teachers have gotten the money and it's a life-changing amount of money. Like people have been able to get married after getting the allotment. And so it really is a big deal that we are going the extra step to do this. I would encourage any district in this call to start doing those 3 steps that we had on the at the end of the presentation here. Identify what you currently have, where you want to go, how you're going to build consensus, and make sure that these teachers can be included, because they really do deserve to be included. We know so many teachers around the state work very, very hard. We know that recruiting and retainment is an issue. Recruiting and retaining teachers is an issue as well. And so it just there's really no downside to building out a system and getting your teachers designated. Would encourage you all to do that. We just have a few minutes left, and so I'm going to go ahead and we will wrap it up. I want to thank all of my panelists. Um, I want to thank all my panelists, Wendy, Alicia, and Anne Marie from across the state who shared their successes with TIA. They've been doing this. They've been doing it well. Really appreciate when you give that field level experience to our districts. It definitely comes across different when it's coming from one of y'all than when it comes from TEA. So appreciate that perspective. To round us out, we do have a survey. Deborah's going to drop the link for the survey into the chat right now. Would appreciate your feedback. We are looking to get better at doing these technical assistance sessions. If you see anything, if you like something as well, we want to know about that too. So if like you really enjoyed something, you really enjoyed that district panel, or the ability to ask questions or the resources, let us know what's working and what's not working so we can bring you the best product available. While you do that, want to go over some additional resources. These are 2 things you should bookmark. This is the updated TIA guidebook for 25-26 school year that is now available. You can find it at the link on this page. And as we've mentioned earlier, our TIA's third-party assessment options list going to be a great resource as you kind of just figure out what is available in the assessment market. What can I plug and play? What do we need to do more research on, etc. So those are two great resources as you go into developing your system. To help you further develop your system, we do have some technical assistance coming soon. We have our Choosing Student Growth Measure series overview of portfolios that will be done by the Portfolio and SLO Hub. They will be presenting next week with us, and so really happy to have them lend that expertise to that. I did, in addition, the following week on 10/8, we're going to have our intro to SLOs or our overview of SLOs as well. So if you want to learn more, as Anne Marie said, she's implementing SLOs this year. It's been a fun journey to get all of her teachers, make sure all of her teachers are eligible. And so that could be an option as well. Would encourage you to join us. If you need to know a little bit about your spending plan, we have Creating a TIA Spending Plan. That is part of our New to TIA series. That's going to be on October 22nd at 10 a.m. Would love to see you there. And then we have Promoting Professional Growth through Teacher Observation Systems and Practices on November 19th. Would love to see you there as well. And in December, don't worry, we'll have an updated slide because we have our application launch and all that will be happening. So definitely join us for these upcoming TA sessions. You're going to learn so much and you're going to be very well prepared to submit your TIA application come April if you do. I want to thank all of our panelists and I want to thank everyone here for joining us today. You can find the materials in the folder for this presentation. If you have any questions, please reach out to the TIA inbox at tia@tea.texas.gov. Thank you so much.